Good afternoon and welcome to Invicta News. I'm Roger Andrews.
And I'm Leisha Gallagher. The time is 3 o'clock and these are your top stories on Friday the 22nd of January.
A leaked government document has revealed ministers are considering a £500 COVID payment to those who test positive. The suggestion would aim to help low-paid workers afford to self-isolate and slow the transmission of the virus.
Nissan has said its Sunderland plant is secure for the long term after a trade deal was reached between the UK and the EU. Nissan's Chief Operating Officer Ashwani Gupta told the Today programme that they were loyal to the coastal city.
Nissan's future in Sunderland is secured for the long term under the business conditions which have been agreed and declared. And we are committed to the Sunderland and we are committed to the European operations.
Today marks another travel ban from the UK. Arrivals from Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of Congo will be stopped from entering the UK to control the spread of the South African variant of COVID-19. The two countries join 11 other South African nations banned from entering the UK for similar reasons.
Clothes sales have fallen by almost 25%, the largest annual fall in history. Figures show that despite a slight pickup in sales during December due to the easing of lockdown, sales began to fall soon after.
James Bond film No Time to Die has died once again. The film has been delayed for a third time because of the coronavirus pandemic. It's been rescheduled to debut on the 8th of October.
But first, a new COVID-19 payout is being considered by ministers to decrease the coronavirus deaths and infection rates. Esther Okusaga has our top story and joins us now.
So, Esther, can you tell us more about this possible COVID-19 payout?
Well, ministers are considering paying £500 to everyone in England who tests positive for COVID-19. This is being done to support the self-isolation scheme after government have found that only 17% of people with symptoms are coming forward to get a test.
And how did this information come about?
It was among the suggestions in a leaked document from the Department of Health. The 16-page document dated 19th of January and also marked official sensitive.
What are the concerns?
Currently, it's only a suggestion. A senior government source has said it's been drawn up by officials and has not been considered by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Government sources are firmly downplaying the idea. Another ethical concern is low-paid workers not being able to self-isolate and people just getting COVID for the sake of the money.
What is going to happen now?
Boris Johnson is due to give a briefing on coronavirus today at 5 p.m. The government's coronavirus operations team, chaired by Michael Gove, is also expected to meet on Friday.
Thanks, Esther. And now, with the vaccination rollout in full swing, those over 70 and clinically vulnerable in the fourth priority group are able to get their first jab. The Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Moderna vaccines have now all been approved for use in the UK. However, with new strains of COVID-19 emerging and travel bans on even more South African nations, scientists fear a mutating virus could mean less effective vaccines. Leisha Gallagher reports.
Millions across the UK have rolled up their sleeves for the coronavirus vaccine. It is the biggest vaccination programme in the nation's history and in the entire world. All those in the first 3 priority groups should have received their first jab. Now, those over 70 and clinically vulnerable will be contacted. However, an overbearing shadow has been cast as travel corridors have been closed to South Africa, South America and Portugal. This comes as new strains have been discovered. The World Health Organization has warned of significant changes in the protein. This could mean our vaccines are less effective as the antibodies may fail to recognise the virus. Although Johannesburg resident Emma Bevan says the restrictions in South Africa now are not as harsh as during the first wave.
At the beginning of the year, I think South Africa's government did an amazing job with trying to contain the virus and to prepare the healthcare system. And now that we are experiencing a second wave, they seem to have approached it in a bit of a different way. They're not going straight into a harsh lockdown because our economy can't actually handle that. At the end of the day, we all have to be able to live after the pandemic.
Across the Atlantic in Sao Paulo, Juliana Lima explains that Rio de Janeiro is the main source of the problem in Brazil.
Rio de Janeiro never had a proper government, even before the pandemic. It's always been a civil war between the people and the state, the favelas and the state. So it's no wonder to me that it is a mess right now with the pandemic. They're still going to the beaches. They're still going around without masks. They're still partying and doing everything. So in Rio, the situation is really, really bad.
She also urges those in the UK to respect the NHS, as the healthcare system in Brazil is failing to cope.
The health system in Brazil, the public health system, is nothing compared to the NHS. I don't even understand people who criticize the NHS. Like, for me, the NHS is a dream to have in my country.
With scientists working around the clock to study every new mutation, they say the new variants are only slightly different, and so vaccines should stay effective for now. Leisha Gallagher, Invicta News.
The UK retail industry has been massively affected by the global pandemic in the last year, according to the Office for National Statistics. Online sales have made the difference between success and struggle, whilst the government is attempting to assist the most affected small businesses. Adam Broderick reports.
The impact of 2020's economic seesaw has now been revealed, with the UK's retail sector to have been hardest hit by the consequences of lockdown. Clothing stores specifically were the worst affected, with the largest dip in growth since records began. However, shopping online has seen a boost of almost 50%, accounting for a third of all sales, according to the Office for National Statistics. Earlier this month, Rishi Sunak announced a £4.6 billion relief package for struggling businesses.
To support the millions of people who work in those industries, we'll provide one-off cash grants of up to £9,000 per business premises, and give local councils an additional £500 million to support businesses in their area.
Professor of Retail Studies Lee Sparks thinks that this may not be enough to save small businesses.
It certainly hasn't been easy for small retailers, absolutely not. But some of them have managed reasonably well. Moving online has become much more significant both for large retailers and for small retailers. So both ends of the spectrum. Non-food retailing has been badly hit. £9,000 helps, and for some it may be very considerable help. For others, it may be nowhere near what they actually need.
As the potential reopening of the UK draws nearer, the future of the high streets looks surprisingly bright.
Physical stores are always going to have a place. We've also seen during the pandemic, convenience and local has been much more important, so there will be a need for physical stores. Will they be online? Yeah, we've moved to a mix of digital and physical. But I suspect there will be a bit of a swing back from online for certain things as restrictions ease. Because remember, currently with all the lockdowns we've got, you don't have an alternative to online.
Adam Broderick, Invicta News.
With Joe Biden taking over the office of president from Donald Trump on Wednesday, he's been quick to get to work. Here's Felix Reeves with the latest.
So Felix, have the first few days of Joe Biden in office been a success?
In large part, yes. He's rolled back a lot of the controversial policies enacted by Donald Trump, including the repeal of the travel ban, which sought to ban the travel of people from Muslim-majority countries, which Biden has called discriminatory. He's also done well to quell any tensions that remain after the storming of the Capitol 3 weeks ago. As a result of the insurrection, Trump is still expected to face impeachment hearings within the first few weeks of Biden's presidency, which could cause a small stumbling block.
Are there any policies he's focusing on at the moment?
With the first few executive orders, he has been focusing on climate and the coronavirus pandemic. He cancelled the contract for the Keystone XL pipeline in Montana, as well as signalling his intention to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, although that process will take slightly longer to put into place. On the coronavirus front, he's warned Americans that it will get worse before it gets better, as their death toll continues to climb over 400,000. He is optimistic, though, saying that he will deliver 100 million jabs by the 30th of April, 100 days after his inauguration. He's also implemented a mask mandate requiring everyone who can wear a mask to do so on all public transport.
And is there anything unique about his working environment?
Absolutely. He's made a few smaller changes from Trump's setup, including the removal of a Winston Churchill statue and a Diet Coke button. But the real interest is in the Resolute desk. You may have seen pictures of Biden signing numerous executive orders on a desk made out of wood from Chatham's historic dockyard. It was originally given as a gift from Queen Victoria after the American Civil War and has been front and centre ever since. Here's what Chatham councillor Vince Maple had to say.
Seen him already when he's been signing those executive orders, has been signing them on a desk that was made here in Chatham. We should all be proud to say, actually, we're literally supporting Joe Biden making those laws over in the US.
Thank you, Felix.
Kent is set to be hit with snow and heavy rain over the weekend as Storm Christoph continues to batter the coast. There will be a high risk of flooding, which could devastate homes and businesses across the county. Alina Baimahanova reports.
Snow is on its way to Kent with Storm Christoph this weekend as the Met Office has issued a yellow warning predicting 17 hours of heavy snow. Forecasters also say Kent, Sussex and East Anglia are at a high risk of flooding throughout next week, which could disrupt travel and put people out of their houses. The Environment Agency are warning people not to hesitate to leave their homes and seek refuge in local buildings and emergency shelters despite coronavirus restrictions. Local emergency response teams have also planned for managing evacuations in a COVID-safe way. The popular Fenbell Inn in Rochester, a pub and home to an animal conservation project, has dealt with 3 major floods in the past year. Andy Cowell has spoken on how they have been managing the situation.
It's an incredible amount of pressure to have the flooding in respect of that we're in a lockdown anyway, so we have no money coming in. We are sitting here at the mercy of the weather. We have put in quite a bit of drainage down in the zoo area. And what we've really done with the pub is cleared everything out. If the pub floods again, it floods. There is nothing we can do about that.
The pub and zoo is used to receiving visitors from all over the world, but with coronavirus, the business has suffered significantly. They are still urging people across the county and beyond to stay hopeful.
The most important thing is to people's lives, to be safe. At that point when you know you're going to lose your home or business, it is heartbreaking, but then waters will go away. You shouldn't risk your life to try and save furniture. It is unimportant in the real scheme of life.
For now, residents of Kent need to remember to stay safe and take precautions as Christoph makes his way to the southeast. Elina Baimuhanova, Invicta News.
Police were called to a wedding party with 400 guests in North London last night. The gathering was held at Yasodi Hattori Senior Girls' School in Stamford Hill. Organisers are facing a £10,000 fine, while 5 other guests were issued with £200 fines. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Priti Patel announced today that fines for house parties will now increase to £800.
A Kent hospital has been evacuated following a chemical spill. Fire and rescue services were called to the Royal Victoria Hospital in Folkestone at 9 a.m. It is believed the hospital was ventilated by crews and is now reopened, but emergency services remain at the scene.
The universal credit debate continues. Another effort by the Labour Party to put pressure on the government was cut short. A motion was put forward by councillors last night to stop the £20 a week cut to universal credit. Ayomakun Adakayero was there.
Last night, Medway Labour councillors attempted to put forward a motion to mount pressure on the government regarding universal credit. This followed a successful non-binding vote in Parliament on the issue of extending a £20 increase in universal credit. After hearing statements from Labour councillor Theresa Murray, the motion put forward was denied.
Think about as well how you would survive on that sort of money when average rents in the South East rose by 6.1% last year.
According to studies by Medway Labour and Cooperative Group, the decision in this area will affect over 20,000 residents in Medway. The leader of the group, Vince Maple, was hopeful that this motion would pass.
I know lots of residents across Medway who perhaps had never been on universal credit before the coronavirus crisis, and they found themselves in really challenging circumstances.
This increase was implemented last year by the government, but is due to expire in April. There have been accusations that Labour have been using this issue as a political stunt. The Chatham Central Councillor, Vince Maple, says this is not the case.
People making sure they survive during the coronavirus crisis, and that support that should be there has been withdrawn. That's not a political stunt. Look, this is more serious than politics. Coronavirus is a massive global issue, and one of the things we've got to do is help those most vulnerable.
When reached for comment before the council meeting, Councillor Jane Chitty responded that our reporters followed the debate first to approach appropriate speakers. At the meeting, no Conservative councillors spoke up against the motion before it was voted against. The Conservative Party have been contacted since the meeting for an additional comment. I am Ekan Adekayero, Invicta News.
One Kent MP says the vaccination priority lists are wrong and the main priority should be teachers. Sir Roger Gale, the Conservative MP for North Thanet, believes that teachers need to be top of the list so children can return to the classroom.
I feel very strongly now that we should not be sending children back to school, either at primary school or secondary school level, until teachers have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. And I think that the teachers should be given priority to get that vaccination so that our schools can reopen as soon as possible. I believe that it is possible for a lot of home learning to be done. It's not satisfactory. I'm not suggesting for one moment it's a substitute, but a lot of home learning can be done. And it's then a question of giving teaching staff the priority to get the vaccinations.
There are fears the education gap could widen during the pandemic as homeschooling becomes the new normal. With some children without access to technology and a quiet space to learn, the level playing field seen in schools is no more. Amber Sunner has the story.
Schools have been forced to close their doors once again, leaving millions of children across the country to face learning from home. The Education Policy Institute found that disadvantaged pupils were, on average, 18 months of learning behind their peers by the time they finished their GCSEs. This figure accounts for the quality of learning before the pandemic. Sam Tuckett, a senior researcher at the Institute, says the first lockdown widened this gap as it showed that poorer children were less likely to have access to a digital device or have a quiet place to study.
There's such a gap in the resources between the disadvantaged children and their more affluent peers that it's inevitable that this gap will get wider.
£1 billion of government funding has been allocated to help close this gap. However, it may not be targeting the right areas.
The majority of this catch-up funding, a pupil from an affluent background will receive the same level of funding as a pupil from a disadvantaged background, which we think needs a rethink.
Some schools have adapted well to the changes that come with online learning. Glyn Bishop, a head teacher at a primary school in West Yorkshire, believes that it has improved the quality of learning and plans to continue using it, even when children are back in the classroom.
When we've looked at closing our gaps, actually we found that children accelerated their learning because they've been accessing the support. Our use of our online teaching will carry on once lockdowns are a faint memory.
Glyn says his school is trying to close the education gap as best they can, using help from the Department of Education and the school resources already available to them.
We got 38 laptops so far from the DFE. 70 of our own laptops have gone into family homes to try and get to the point where anybody who needs to be online can be online.
One parent outlines her son's difficulties during online learning.
Due to the Wi-Fi difficulties, the missed sessions, and myself not being very well at the time, they offered us the chance for him to go into school by himself to do his work. But the risk is balancing out the probability of being affected by the virus.
For now, it's pencils down and webcams on as children wait for schools to reopen. For Amber Sunner, Invicta News.
Well, now an initiative has been set up to achieve 100,000 hours of teaching to UK-based pupils throughout lockdown. Close the Lockdown Gap is a free online service that matches teachers with pupils to help continue valuable education during these strange times. After its launch last week, earlier today we spoke with co-founder Mustafa Kamal, who answered some of our questions.
He gave us an idea of why he set up this initiative.
As we enter our third lockdown, it became clear that the impact on students might be much more longer lasting because they've had about a year outside their formal learning environment. That has a huge impact, especially on those who might not have the best facilities, might not have the best digital equipment, or don't have parents who went to universities. And so the initiative has really been brought about by trying to tackle that inequality.
He also spoke about the effect of being away from school and what that's doing to children.
Psychologists and clinicians have talked about how this is a very crucial part of people's lives and they don't have the mentorship and guidance, and they could potentially lose out in the longer term when it comes to their job prospects or employment opportunities. So that's really the inspiration behind the initiative. We want to do something to plug that gap.
Close the Lockdown Gap works to help students who need it most.
When students sign up, we try to be as egalitarian as possible. So they have to fill out a form saying what their circumstances are, what their situation is, and we try to get the resources to the people who need it the most first.
He also told us about the subjects which are in high demand for the tutoring service.
The most in-demand subject from students is definitely chemistry, and then we have maths, of course, and the other two sciences and English. But our offering is all secondary school year groups, all subjects, and we've even had tutors sign up for dance, GCSE, and that sort of thing. So we are really trying to cover as many bases as possible.
That is all from Mustafa, the founder of Close the Lockdown Gap and his initiative. You can sign up to be a teacher or a student at closethelockdowngap.com.
As the third national lockdown is not yet over, some people with eating disorders say they are finding it increasingly difficult to cope. Beat, the UK's leading eating disorders charity, has launched a series of support schemes as the number of people reaching out for help grows. Our reporter Kayi Mack has the story.
For Zoe Burnett, a new mom, a TEDx speaker, and an atypical anorexia sufferer, counting calories and excessive exercise are a coping mechanism and emotional avoidance. But when the coronavirus started, even her last possible resort was thrown out of the window.
Being trapped almost with my own thoughts all day, every day is just really exhausting. The one thing that I found so difficult was seeing the panic buying. I get so stressed out in supermarkets at the best of times, but then seeing all my safe foods, so the foods that I can eat when I'm really struggling, if you like, to see the shelves bare of all my safe foods, to then for me to have to think of different things to eat on the spot for the rest of the week, I really struggle with.
During the first lockdown, she managed to stay well because she knew she had to for her unborn baby. But after her daughter was born in September and the second lockdown hit, she found herself completely powerless to pick up yet another battle.
I was so exhausted from the first fight, from that first lockdown, so exhausted with everything that happened. When the second one came, I almost felt exasperated, I guess. I was oh God, here we go again. Right. And now it's got to the third one and I will hold my hands up and say I am in a full-blown relapse at the minute. I've just I've lost my fight a little bit.
Virgo, a campaigner against eating disorders, says she's been contacted by many people reaching out for help since the start of COVID.
For people with eating disorders, it's been quite challenging. There has been an increased focus on food and exercise, but also the kind of sheer uncertainty and people isolating a lot has meant that for people with eating disorders, it's those kind of factors that the eating disorder really thrives off.
She says businesses and individuals should all be conscious when putting content out on social and mainstream media, because even if just knowing someone is going out for a walk can be triggering for those with eating disorders. Kayi Mack, Invicta News.
Looking back to this day last year, the city of Wuhan went into a full lockdown as fears surrounding coronavirus grew. 11 million people in the city became the first in the world to face strict government measures. Our China correspondent Kayi Mack joins us now. How is China doing now, 1 year after the Wuhan lockdown?
So now China has two main areas of concern in terms of COVID. First is that a team from the World Health Organization is now in Wuhan to investigate the origin of the virus.
This is the official WHO investigation team. Their arrival here has been a long time coming. They're first going to a hotel or a government facility somewhere because they all have to do 2 weeks quarantine.
Another is how to contain the spread of virus during the Chinese New Year holiday season. This is the biggest travel peak of the year. According to China's official figures, about 1.7 billion trips are expected in the coming days. Now, the government has announced that those returning to the rural areas need to provide a negative COVID test result done within 7 days. And upon arrival, they will have to self-isolate for 2 weeks and take a test every 7 days.
Is it right that China now does not have a national lockdown?
Yes, but there is a system in place which resembles the England's tier system that we had last year. As of yesterday, the government has listed 6 high-risk areas and 58 medium-risk areas, where the police and medical staff will wear hazmat suits on the street at night and put up barriers just to distance the contaminated areas from the rest of the public. But across the country, you rarely see people panicking because they are looking forward to celebrate the Chinese New Year that's coming up next month.
Thanks for that, Kai.
Meanwhile, in France, they're seeing a plateau in cases and hospitalizations. We're joined by our French correspondent, Alina Baimahanova.
So, Alina, how are the numbers in France now?
So for now, yesterday, France has recorded 310 deaths, and today there has been so far 26,565 new cases. Well, for now, from the Minister of Health, he says that around 1 to 1.5% of those new cases come from the new strain in the United Kingdom. However, that also means that around 200 to 300 cases are from that new strain.
What are some of the restrictions?
So some of the restrictions include the 6 p.m. curfew, which means that all citizens of France have to be at home by 6 p.m. Otherwise, they can face fines up to 2,000 euros. In addition to this, all the ski stations are closed, restaurants are closed, but shops remain open due to the plateau effect that the hospitalizations and the new cases are experiencing.
And would you say you're scared? What's it like there? What's the reaction of the people in France?
So in France, people are very at peace. They do fear a national lockdown, and there have been talks, but for now, ministers are keeping this question afloat and are not answering it to the media.
Thank you, Alina.
Thank you.
With 2021 ushering in a new era for the UK out of the single market, hopes were high for greater control of the channel for British fishermen. But after just 3 weeks, tensions are rising over the government's lack of planning at the ports. Felix Reeves reports.
Fishing organisations are continuing to criticise the government over its lack of preparedness following Britain's exit from the European Union. Increased checks and delays at major ports has prompted the Prime Minister to pledge £23 million to compensate those who've lost trade. Reports suggest that the UK fishing industry could face £1 million worth of daily losses after Brexit. This has prompted backlash across the country, with fishing firms protesting in Westminster. This was in part due to Jacob Rees-Mogg's comments, claiming that Brexit had improved the rights of British fishers.
What is happening is that the government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
Despite the happy fish, Boris Johnson has accepted that there are teething problems at the border. Solicitor Sarah Adkins spoke on those issues and the potential problems they could cause in the future.
Well, first of all, yes, there are teething problems. There are some issues that will be resolved in fairly short order, but there are fundamentally significant changes to the basis on which fishery produce can move from Great Britain to the EU and Northern Ireland now. And some of those are insurmountable.
Fishing was one of the key hurdles the government had to overcome during Brexit negotiations. And as it stands, EU boats will still continue to fish in UK waters for at least the next few years. Barry Dias of the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations feels that the government didn't live up to their promises.
We were given every reason to believe that the UK would secure a fundamental change in the relationship with the EU on fishing rights, and the final result has fallen far short of that.
As the UK starts to adapt to the outcomes of Brexit, the fishing industry will be hoping to avoid the continuing issue of red tape at the border. Felix Reeves, Invicta News.
You're listening to Invicta News. The time is 3:30.
After yellow weather warnings for wind and rain across the Kent coast this morning, it's staying cold tonight across the county, with overnight lows of -2 degrees. Looking forward to the weekend, there is a chance of heavy snow on Sunday, with yellow weather warnings still in place, staying wet and windy once again into next week.
Now for a traffic update, there may be slight delays along the M20 after a collision westbound between junctions 8 and 9 earlier today, along with several road closures off the M2 and A2.
A study has named Kent as the region with the most dangerous roads in the UK. Comparison service U-Switch found the county had the highest number of road-related casualties. It comes as the Road Safety Foundation calls on the government to invest £1.2 billion into UK roads. Leisha Gallagher has the story.
Every day, hundreds of thousands start their engines and head out on Kent roads with very little thought. 3,844. This is the number of fatalities on the roads across the county in the last 5 years. Research has now found this to be the highest figure in the entire country. A spokesperson for Kent County Council said that they work hard to ensure their roads are as safe as possible, but appreciate too many people are involved in crashes on Kent's roads, and one crash is too many. However, they said there is only so much they can do, and the safety of our roads is the responsibility of all road users. Neil Gregg from the charity I Am Road Smart said the biggest problem is drivers failing to look at their surroundings.
So people think they're glancing right and left, pulling out the junctions, but they haven't actually seen the oncoming vehicle, and that's why you end up with crashes. So it's basically inattention and not being fully concentrating on your driving as you go along.
Kent was also ranked in some of the worst positions for pedestrian and cyclist safety, with many now choosing to walk and cycle more often in the third national lockdown. There is a real concern that the casualty numbers could increase if people aren't well informed.
For cyclists and walkers, yes, you have to understand that often a van driver, a lorry driver, some car drivers can't see you very well sometimes at junctions because of the design of the vehicle. And also, of course, you need to be aware of the speed that the vehicle is coming towards you at, because they just simply may not be able to stop in time. And that involves everybody sharing the road safety and all taking responsibility for their individual actions.
So, as the wheels keep spinning, Kent drivers should buckle up and switch on. Leisha Gallagher, Invicta News.
Residents in Canterbury have been left with Christmas trees lying around their homes for weeks after the collection was delayed. But with no plan until next weekend, the Christmas spirit is forced to live on. Kayi Mack has more.
Canterbury's Christmas trees collection was due to take place on Monday, but now it's been suspended after it became clear that the waste contractor Circle is understaffed due to COVID-related illness and isolation. Councillor Chris Cornell from Canterbury City Council says this decision was not totally unexpected.
So the problems with Serco have essentially been building for 2 to 3 weeks or so. Serco has a contingency plan in place, which essentially sees it begin to remove non-essential services. Last week, the staff shortage began to impact on domestic cleaning, and a number of recycling round return. The mist could not be essentially return.
He adds that this is not the first year the council has had problems with collecting the trees.
Christmas trees are always a problem, even when the system works entirely correctly. Because when you've got small rat runs of a street, it's very obvious for people to sometimes put them in pedestrianised areas or little cut-throughs between houses. But then the major problem is essentially you can't get a lorry there to pick it up.
Cervical has around 120 members of staff. In a normal circumstance, it only takes 1 or 2 crews to carry out the job. But now, because of COVID, the company does not even have enough capacity to collect household rubbish. Rachel Lewis, a Canterbury resident, tells us how this has affected her.
So in Canterbury, we have had rubbish and waste disposal problems in the past, recent past actually, because we don't have enough bin men coming around to get our stuff. So I've noticed a lot of the times that our bins have actually not been emptied. And I do get why they're not taking the Christmas trees at the moment. And I really understand it, because otherwise we'd have piles of actual rubbish building up.
With the council to review the decision next weekend, it is hoped that one half of the problem will be dealt with next week. Kai Mack, Invicta News.
New figures reveal that 1 in 10 women have delayed getting a smear test for fear of catching COVID. Our reporter Lily Moore spoke to one woman who urges others to attend their appointments.
It was after a standard smear test that Elizabeth Ham found out she had cervical cancer. Despite not having any symptoms, she was diagnosed in November. She says it was thanks to that routine appointment that doctors caught it early.
The smear test I've had has saved my life, because I've got 0 symptoms and I've got stage 1B cervical cancer. It's quite scary that it can go so undetected. I could have been, say, stage 4 when a symptom started, and at that point it's untreatable. Hopefully with my treatment I'll live a long life with my daughter.
It's estimated 350,000 women in the UK have not attended their smear tests for fear of catching COVID. And it's not the only reason why some patients are putting it off. Some women say they are embarrassed about appearance or hygiene, and victims of sexual assault may find the procedure difficult.
Change in the future ahead of me now.
The pandemic also adds another layer of difficulty when it comes to cancer treatment. Loved ones are often unable to accompany patients to hospital appointments. Elizabeth says on one occasion, when her partner was able to be with her, she faced some difficult questions.
I felt like it was frowned upon, or like every time someone saw me with them, they're like, "Oh, you're here for a 12-week scan?" Because like that's the only reason partners are meant to be there. And I was like, well, no. But I've been told that because it's cancer is allowed. And they're like, right, okay. But then 3 separate people asked me that. Especially when you're having like a hysterectomy to move any chance of having future children. It's not what you want to hear. Are you here for a 12-week scan? No, I'm here to get it removed.
Calls are now growing for the rollout of home screening kits, which are being piloted in some parts of the UK as a way of allowing women to do the tests in the privacy of their own home. But for now, the message from medical professionals is, if you're invited to have a smear test, don't put it off. It could save your life. Lily Moore, Invicta News.
Most university students continue to face uncertainty about their degrees, and some say studying from home impacts their mental health. Esther Okasaga has more on this story.
University students, now on their 3rd lockdown, are continuing to study from home, with virtual lectures and little to no social experience. First-year student Ellen Shepherd describes her experience currently at university.
Overall, the university experience has been different than I think it would have been if there wasn't COVID in terms of socially.
Many students are facing uncertainty causing mental health worries. Some students feel as though the government and the university are not doing much to support. Tareem Sadiq, a final year student studying pharmacy at the University of Kent, feels as though the government are unaware of the stress students are facing.
The pandemic has been challenging for almost every student I know, and it stems from universities and the government disregarding the pressures and stress of having to essentially teach ourselves our degree courses for the better part of a year. As most people know, online learning just isn't the same quality as you would get in person. And although I understand universities are trying to help as best they can by signposting online mental health services, it seems there's a double standard.
Temi Oriaba, another final year university student at the University of Kent, believes mentors and academic advisors should focus more on the mental health struggles students currently are facing in the pandemic.
It could be more focused on the mental well-being of students and not just their academic success. I think that mentors and advisors should really make it a point to discuss the emotional toll that this whole pandemic is having on our students.
Universities are trying their best to accommodate their students and support them through their health and well-being, such as services being provided by University of Kent called Student Support and Wellbeing. The staff in Canterbury and Medway continue to operate remotely. This is Esther Okusaga reporting for Invicta News.
A young entrepreneur from Kent has won the prestigious Young Innovators Award. This year, 64 young people received an award. Valentina Di Pietro from Kent is one of the winners. She is the founder of her own company, MyCore, and we spoke to her to find out more.
It was great to speak to Valentina. Firstly, she explained how she felt when she first found out that she had won the award.
It was a really exciting moment, which really released a lot of pressure in terms of next steps, where the company's got to be.
Going back to the root, if you excuse the pun, the product of MyCore is actually made with mushroom roots. The materials that come out of this are fire retardant, insulating and sound absorbing. So really innovative work, clearly. She told us about the inspiration behind this product.
During my studies at the Royal College of Art, I explored materials of the future, and I imagined that all of these materials could be biodegradable, that could go back into nature seamlessly, that we could use our waste sources as a new raw material. But I ended up developing these materials mainly through trial and error. So I became a hybrid designer that also works with biological processes.
This is a hard time for any business right now, dealing with the financial impact of the pandemic. Valentina decided to start up her business right in the middle of it all. Valentina told us that you do not have to be a certain type of person to become a successful entrepreneur.
I didn't think that I had the general characteristics of what an entrepreneur was going to be. It shows that these are all skills that can be learned, and it shows that really anyone who's got an idea that's actually solving a problem should be getting into entrepreneurship. It is not an easy ride, for sure, but I would definitely encourage, if you've got an idea, you should pursue it.
Wise words there, and who knows, maybe one of our listeners could be the next contender for the Young Innovators Award.
Big cats in the UK have always been a hot topic of debate and mystery. Since lockdown came into place and people are walking more often, multiple reports of sightings have appeared throughout the country, with Kent being no exception. Matthew Evans reports.
The legend of British big cats has returned since entering a third national lockdown. People have been exploring the British countryside to escape and exercise, and since then, big cat sightings have been on the up. In Stroud last week, there were reports of an animal resembling a leopard roaming some fields. I spoke to renowned big cat expert Frank Tunbridge to learn more about the myth.
I would say there must be about 500 in total, maybe more, of these big cats, black leopards, pumas, and hybrids. We must not forget hybrids, because a lot of those reports that come through to me are very uniform in their description. They don't come across as a full-size puma or a full-size black leopard. They come across with sort of a variation of the two.
Frank believed the police were more than aware of these animals marauding the British countryside.
The main evidence, which never comes to light, of course, because the whole thing about it is the authorities and the police are aware of these big cats living in this country and breeding, but they don't want the panic situation. They've got enough on their plates at the moment, especially.
I spoke to zoologist Dr. Izzy Winder. I wondered whether there was a scientific explanation for all this.
I have, I think, heard of an instance or two where people have captured big cats that don't seem like they should be native. but and there's an explanation that goes, this has escaped from somewhere, it has escaped from captivity. And there's no evidence in most of the cases, or in the couple of cases I can think of, there's no evidence that there would have been a population of them. And there's not yet evidence that convinces me, but I can understand the attraction of the idea.
British big cats will remain a topic of legend until concrete proof exists. But just in case on your daily walk, keep checking your shoulder. Matthew Evans, Invicta News.
50 years ago this month, the legendary designer Coco Chanel passed away in Paris. Half a century later, we take a look at her legacy and some of her most controversial moments. Rodri Andrews has more.
She was creative, she was ambitious, and she was strong. That's how the author of The Real Coco Chanel, Rose Square, described the iconic French designer. Throughout her career, Gabrielle Coco Chanel broke the established rules of fashion, becoming a pioneer of women's emancipation. One of her most iconic pieces, the little black dress, is seen by many like Square as more than just a fashion breakthrough.
It's always chic, it's always elegant, and it's always practical. It's a form of power that she gave to women who were just wearing all sorts of very beautiful but also crazy outfits.
Alongside Chanel's creation, there's a darker side to her story. She's been accused of being an anti-Semite, a homophobe, and a Nazi spy. Her anti-Semitism was noted by the editor of Marie Claire, Marcel Heydrich, describing it as both verbal and passionate. Journalist Tansy Hoskins thinks that the industry's focus solely on the art rather than the fascist connections is wrong.
I think people living in society today are subjected to a propaganda campaign. She was deeply committed to Nazi ideology.
Chanel even had a Nazi spy codename, Westminster. But she was not alone. Hugo Boss, Christian Dior, and Cristobal Balenciaga all had Nazi contacts.
For me, I don't think we can end the systemic racism without being honest about the people that are idolized within the fashion industry.
With the company now worth $9 billion, the House of Chanel managed to distance itself from the controversy. Singer Akemi from the Berklee College of Music had one of her songs used alongside the Chanel Resort Collection 2021. She herself has an affection for the brand.
I was living with my mom. I was always seeing her wearing the most beautiful fashion items ever. She is a fashion icon. But there was one thing that she wouldn't let me borrow, and that was her Chanel bags. And she told me, you get your first Chanel purse when you become a woman. But I am apparently still not a woman. Life works in very funny ways, and maybe I don't have a purse, but I am part of the Chanel family. Either way.
Coco Chanel's brand remains at the height of the industry. For the fashion community at least, it appears that the art can outweigh the artist. Rodri Andrews, Invicta News. All singing, all dancing, but no prizes? Every year, the very best of Hollywood gather with the dream of winning an Oscar. But it's surprising that no one has ever won Best Original Musical. Ayoma Kanadakayero has the story.
La La Land, Greatest Showman, Mary Poppins. Iconic original musicals that have won audiences' hearts over the big screen. The musical film genre is so popular that it has its own Oscar category, Best Original Musical. However, in the 20 years since this category has been created, no film has ever won the award. A great number of popular musical films have been adapted from Broadway. Dr. Eleonora Sammartino is a lecturer in film studies. She explains that studios tend to adapt rather than create a new musical because it's cheaper.
Making a musical that is completely original is a great risk. It's not a commercial viability. The musical has always relied on pre-existing sources, maybe songs or storylines, or we could even consider stars as a sort of pre-existing source because they're relying on the persona of that specific star.
The award has very narrow criteria as they must contain original songs. However, Baffius Stamey Productions have been working on the musical film Fix for the past 2 years.
If I like who I find, then I just might keep them around.
A minimum of 10 films are needed for each Oscar category. Founders Nick Baffia and Julia Stamey have been in contact with their competition to make sure they reach that quota.
Try to win the Oscar, but
we've never made a feature-length musical film original by ourselves. So I think what motivated us the most was, again, like having the lofty goal of like Academy Award, and also just kind of like the camaraderie of knowing that there are people who are really talented and having the opportunity to work with those people and like letting every person kind of shine in their own unique way.
Due to the pandemic, Nick and Julia's plans have been postponed to next year's Academy Awards. Until then, I guess the best original musical category will be Like Lost Treasure, waiting for the fool to dream. Ayomika Adekayero, Invicta News.
Glastonbury Festival have announced they are cancelled for the second year running. Festival goers have been expressing their disappointment. Matthew Evans reports.
Yesterday, Britain's largest and most iconic festival, Glastonbury, announced it would be cancelled for the second year in a row due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It adds on more heartache from the past year for music enthusiasts who saw Glastonbury 2021 as a fitting way to return to normality. I spoke to James Kilpin, who works for Fest Ticket, to see what this news has had on his industry.
As I'm sure you can imagine, it's been a very strange and often difficult time to be working in the festival industry. Ultimately, it's hard to know exactly what this summer will look like. You've got events like Parklife that have already taken the decision to move from early June to mid-September. And it wouldn't surprise me if there are others that look to follow suit, particularly with Glastonbury now making the tough decision to postpone again, which would obviously normally be happening at the end of June. Whether it's just my optimism or possibly even wishful thinking, I do think that we'll see the return of festivals in some form before the end of this year.
Junior doctor Anton Matsko, who was due to go to Glastonbury this year, was as equally disappointed.
Obviously, it's not the news that we want to be hearing, but it just reinforces the magnitude of the situation that we face. We must continue to stay alert and do all we can to contain the virus.
Ellen and James were both supposed to attend Glastonbury this year after securing tickets for over a year ago. But despite the disappointment, they feel that such measures are actually warranted.
I feel like a good movie and laughs with friends is something people need out there. However, you can't be naive.
I'm disappointed it's not going ahead this year, but at the end of the day, I think it would have been a bit different anyway. So everyone would have been trying to stay out of each other's way, and it would just been a bit of a cesspit.
With some optimism, some festivals may still go ahead this year, but none will fill the void left by Glastonbury's cancellation. Matthew Evans, Invicta News.
Now here's Oliver Blundell with the sport.
Last Saturday, Gillingham took on Accrington Stanley at home and came away with a 1-0 win. This was Gillingham's first win in their last 4 games, snapping a 3-game losing streak. With this win, Gillingham are now 13th in the League One table. New signing Ollie Lee had this to say about the game.
That exactly is the perfect way to start. We knew Accrington's a tough place to go, and I mean, most of us have been there before, and it's not going to be pretty, but we've done really well. We passed it well at times, and I really enjoyed it, to be honest. It was a really good day.
On Tuesday, Ebbsfleet beat Slough 2-0 at home. This moved them up to 8th in the table, 1 point behind Eastbourne and 7th. Manager Dennis Curip had this to say.
Analysis for me, we had a great first half. I was very pleased with the boys, very happy for them, because after the Saturday game, to come back on Tuesday for such a strong opponent, it's not easy.
Maidstone lost their home game on Tuesday 2-0 against Braintree Town. They are now 4 points behind Ebbsfleet in 10th and are searching for a playoff position. Their manager, Hack, had this to say.
It's all well and good when we stand here and take the accolades when the team's done well. I want to apologise to the supporters that screwed it tonight. The first half was an absolute embarrassment from my point of view. I didn't expect that from my team. I got it, and I suppose it does happen, and it happened to us, and it was a reality check.
Now looking to the next string of games, Gillingham will be taking on Rochdale on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Maidstone are playing away from home at 3 o'clock on Saturday against St Albans, and Ebbsfleet host Chelmsford City at 3 on Saturday as well. In national news, Liverpool and Man United, the then 1 and 2 in the Premier League table, played to a stalemate. Both managers said that their teams missed big chances, which cost them both the game. And Man City moved to the top of the Premier League table after beating Aston Villa 2-0 at home last night. England's cricketers will look to clinch their Test series against Sri Lanka tomorrow, as they play their second test of 3 at Gore. England's highest wicket taker, James Anderson, will replace Stuart Broad to an otherwise unchanged team. England captain Joe Root had this to say.
Guys to stick their hand up and improve on that first performance. We did a lot of very good things. You mentioned the 2 spinners, and the great thing for me is that, yeah, they had success, but they've both got great attitudes where they want to get better.
And finally, in international news, the notorious Conor McGregor will fight Dustin Poirier on Saturday in an elimination fight for the vacant lightweight belt. UFC owner Dana White said this about the fight.
The Conor McGregor that we're dealing with right now stays, on course and does what he's supposed to do. We could see Conor 2 or 3 times this year.
In basketball, it was 15 years ago today that Kobe Bryant made history by scoring 81 points in one game. Felix Reeves reports.
81-point game. Ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed the second greatest scoring performance in NBA history.
15 years ago today, Kobe Bryant pulled off the most impressive solo performance in modern NBA history, scoring 81 points. As Kobe's Los Angeles Lakers faced off against the Toronto Raptors, no one thought he would go off on the run that he did. He had a below-average team around him, and the Lakers were not the team they were in 2002, when they won the NBA championship. Matt Brown, a photographer based in LA, shot the historical game and spoke of Kobe's heroics.
Kobe goes for 29 or 30 in the first half. Second half, though, he goes bonkers. He's hitting free throws. He's hitting 3-pointers. He puts a team on his back. It was watching Superman take over. I am blessed that I was able to be in that place and see that kind of atmosphere.
This was just one of the many pieces of the puzzle which made Kobe Bryant one of the greatest basketball players of all time. His icon status in LA continues to live on, especially to those that knew him.
I knew Kobe pretty well. We had a bit of a little interesting kind of relationship that was more than just photographer athlete. You didn't need to be the lucky people to be in the crowd. Like, there's still kids that graffiti his little number or name.
With the world still reeling from his death last January, many saw the Lakers' championship win in 2020 as an homage to the greatest LA Laker ever, with LeBron dedicating the win to him. Kobe's impact on the sport has not gone amiss. Patrick Sana, a basketball podcaster, spoke on his global legacy.
His stature and his sort of mentality towards basketball is unforgettable. He made basketball a worldwide sport, and it's very upsetting the fact that he died in such a tragic accident.
Kobe's Mamba mentality will continue to live on forever, 15 years on from one of his greatest accomplishments. Felix Reeves, Invicta News.
And finally, 500,000 people are expected to take to their gardens next weekend for the world's biggest garden wildlife survey. Lily Moore reports.
It's time to fill up your bird feeders and dust off your binoculars for this year's Big Garden Bird Watch. The RSPB are asking people to spend just 1 hour recording how many birds you can spot in your garden, even from a window or balcony, and then let them know what you've seen. However, it doesn't always go according to plan, as Catherine Green has found out over the past 6 years.
Usually the birds seem to have this thing that they actually know it's the garden bird watch, and some of them don't turn up. And when you stop, said that you have to sit for 1 hour, and when you start counting them, there's very few. And then when the hour's over, they all come. They do it every year.
The survey to date has provided the RSPB with nearly 9 million hours of data, counting 137 million of them. It has highlighted the winners and the losers in the garden world, alerting the charity to the decline in song thrushes. Lucky for 10-year-old Robin Andrews, his favourite bird ranks fourth, and so he has a high chance of seeing them.
I like bird watching because I find the birds fascinating and I like the look of them. My favourite bird is probably a blue tit. It makes me feel happy when I see rare birds or just any birds.
The bird watch takes place from the 29th to the 31st, so it is not too late to help care for our feathered friends. And it does not matter how much you know about garden birds already. The RSPB will provide a free garden bird watch guide when you sign up online. Lily Moore, Invicta News.
That's all from me, Leisha Gallagher.
And me, Rodri Andrews. That's all from Invicta News. Thank you for listening.